Afternoon. Welcome to Tech Talk with Steve. And Gene and Kevin adopted her.
Hello, and thanks for joining today.
Lisa, she's in the know. Welcome, Lisa.
Yeah.
We might have a couple of extra guests.
Introduce people to what the NSA is. I'd like to start with
You make sure you set your test up properly.
It's going to ask me the diameter of what I'm wrapping.
There's some significant difference here. So
with an F-150 pickup.
there's along that channel.
let's say a user can successfully reach a server.
Remotes are all in the closet, and you're walking around the office area with the main.
And what Test Pro is doing right now, and again, I'm using a single Test Pro into a network.
They went out to the customer site, which was very impressive.
Hello, welcome to episode 22 of Tech Talk with Steve. Win more bids and expand your service offering. My name is Steve Cowles, your host, product manager with AEM. Today, we're going to be talking about some different services you might be able to offer to your end user customers from a contractor standpoint or integrator standpoint, and how that can add to your bottom line. We're going to have a couple of special guests. We'll mostly be talking about testing, but these two guys bring a lot more to the table, and they'll have some extra little tidbits for us, I think. So first up, I'll welcome Blake Ermos, founder of Low Voltage Nation. He specializes in structured cabling, access control, and information security. He started Low Voltage Nation as a way to connect with technicians and business owners through Instagram and a podcast. And Blake's passion is digital marketing, technology, and photography. And Blake says, look him up if you're in Nashville and want to connect and see the city. So welcome,
Yes,
Blake.
Hey, what's up? How are you? Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm good. So next up, we'll welcome Chuck Bowser, RCDD Tech, with 40 plus years of installation, design, estimation, project management skills in the ICT industry. He leverages his knowledge to help educate and encourage and enrich the lives of his fellow peers. As an instructor and host of Let's Talk Cabling podcast and vlog, Chuck brings that would be a vlog, not a vlog. Chuck brings weekly content across all the social media platforms in a manner that everyone can relate to. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you. I'd never mind spending my lunch break with you guys.
Great. We appreciate it. It's very interesting to have both of you on here because both of you have a wealth of experience, and you guys are doing similar things out there to help our industry. And so it's especially nice to have some people on the show who not only are out there, they're out there earning a paycheck for their job, but they're actually trying to help the rest of the people in our industry. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
So you guys, I know, are familiar with Test Pro and the NSA. We're going to be talking a lot about testing and how we can add some value there. And I'll tee a couple things up and get some opinions from you guys on how you might see this as applicable. And then we can kind of open it up for some other stuff. And then in addition to the Test Pro, we're going to talk about our NSA. So, real quickly, I'm going to just share my screen real quick. And just in case there's anybody not familiar, the Test Pro is our multifunction cable certifier. It does a 6-second auto test. So it's going to do the certification that everybody's used to seeing, but it also does a lot more. For the fiber certification, we've added hybrid powered optical fiber. So when you're having to extend that power to a remote point, we've got PoE load validation. So you can figure out, am I really getting the power at that endpoint? And what's the quality of my multi-gigabit Ethernet signal? So, am I getting a good 10 gig circuit? Do I have excessive signal to noise ratio? And a lot more. And then, of course, the NSA Network Service Assistant is really geared more toward those who might not need to certify. So somebody who still needs to do a good high-end physical cable test, but they don't necessarily need to certify. And this does it from a single end, but also incorporates a lot of those other functionalities, the hybrid powered fiber voltage measurement, the PoE load, all that stuff. Network discovery is also available on there. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my camera now. And We'll switch back to camera mode. And there we go. So just based on what you guys know and what I just told our audience, where do you guys see Test Pro and or NSA playing in the field that you guys are involved with, where you've got contractors who typically need to they might need to provide a certification test if it's that type of job, or maybe it's a smaller job, something that maybe doesn't require certification. Maybe it's somebody who's just doing troubleshooting. They're trying to help customers, with moves, adds, changes, those kind of things, but they want to go beyond just a cable test, with the ability to do something like a PoE load test. You see that as a growing area, or having to do more just test the cable.
How much time do we have?
As much as you want.
Well, let's start off this way first. I know that you want to focus on the value add and being able to do other services, right?
Right.
Let's take one step back. You don't get the opportunity to sell those added services if you don't win the bid. You got to get in the door first, right?
Exactly.
And that's why I really like the offerings that you guys have. Number one, if it's not the shortest, it's one of the very shortest test times, period. And when you multiply that across 2,000 cables, 5,000 cables, I did a project one time, I had 10,000 cables, right? And that little bit of time difference makes the difference in the price, so you can win the job. Once you get in the job, then you can start doing the whole value add. Hey, we can also do this and that while we're there. But a lot of people kind of get confused with estimating, because the customer will hit them up. Well, can you do this cheaper? And then they'll start, and they'll just knocking off labor. I'm sorry, it takes the time to do the work that you got to do. So you got to find more efficient ways of doing that. And then on the flip side of that, I had somebody ask me yesterday through direct message on TikTok. They were wanting me to recommend a tester, and they were looking at a competitor's product, and I said, look, here's the reason I really like the AEM. It's got two screens. It's got two screens. So now you got two people who can blast through stuff. As soon as you plug it in, my favorite function, it gives you the map report right away, and that saves you time. And everything boils down to time. Once you win the bid and you got your foot in the door, that's when you start doing the value add.
Right, exactly. So you give them what they originally needed, that certification test, but then you can offer something additional. Say, after everything's up and running, come back in and run a 10 gig SNR test if they've got 10 gig links, or 5 gig to their WAPs or whatever. Make sure that those links are performing as expected. You could do things like network discovery, look at all the IP addresses, run a ping test, trace route, all that good stuff, just to ensure them that not only do we test every link per the standards for certification, but here's another test on every single link, and we can now show you that you have assurance that everything's working as expected. And I'm going to pop up another PDF here. So if Jacqueline can go ahead and share my screen, I'll pull this up. And so as part of that, you would provide them a report. Now, we're used to seeing a report for certification. So you get a summary report and then detail pages throughout. But in this case, I've got more than just my certification on here. So we've got certification. Here's a fiber test. Here's validation test, which is our multi-gig and PoE, and then we've got some network tests. So we can see, here's this is an NSA test, so it's a single-ended test with our network service assistant. Looks very similar to your certification reports, because again, we're doing the same test just from a single end. And then we can get into the multi-gig, the fiber test here that we've got. This was a loop back, and then we've got the actual certification test that we did with the certifier. So here you see the difference where you've got dual ended, and then you go beyond that, you've got that multi-gig and PoE. So here, what we've done, we've actually taken a link that now has active electronics on it. You've got your network gear on it, and we run a test into that link from the standpoint of where the device connects at the end of the link. And we test the PoE at the end of the link. We test the SNR for all these different speeds to make sure that it's performing as expected and doesn't have excessive noise relative to that signal. And then Beyond that, you can do things like here's a Wi-Fi snapshot, letting you know information about the connection. We did a ping test, discovered devices on the network through the Wi-Fi, and the same thing for wired, including here at the bottom, the switch detail telling you what port you're connected to on that link. So you can get that level of detail beyond the certification reports. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch back to cameras now. And all right. So that just kind of drives home what you were saying, Chuck. And if you get your foot in the door, get the certification, then offer these additional services, and you're not going to do that for free, right? So there is a cost to it. You've got manpower involved. So, Blake, what are your thoughts on what Chuck teed up, what we just showed there, as far as being able to get your foot in the door and then being able to offer these extra services? Do you see some value that can be brought to the end users? Do you think more and more people are going to want that level of assurance?
Yeah, for sure. About 12 years ago, I used to be an IT director, so I would actually hire structured cabling companies. And then if I was showing a report like you just showed, because you just showed that to me a few minutes ago before the show, I was blown away by it. And that's going to get your foot in the door. But then once they complete the job, I would ask the guys like, "Hey, are you going to certify and test it?" They're like, "No." I'm like, "Okay, well, that's an issue." But if they can actually offer those services, I was ready to pay for it. I wanted it certified and tested, and I had money. I had a big budget, and I would definitely throw a lot of cash at these guys to make sure everything works properly and certify, test it, qualify, whatever they need to do to make it, and give me those reports so I can report back to my boss. So absolutely, that's a huge value add to it.
So the other application that I see for this, and Chuck, you bring this up often on your podcast, is that you don't just test the cable once and assume it's going to work forever, because over time you've got moves, adds, and changes. Things are going on with the network. People swap out a patch cord, they put a cheap patch cord in. That's going to affect your PoE. And if anybody's interested in that, you can go back through our previous episodes. I did an episode that talks about that. About PoE, and we talk about patch cords and their impact. And while we're on the subject of PoE, when you're doing moves, adds, and changes, a lot of people don't think about this. If your PoE is active and you're unplugging from a jack and plugging back in, every time you disconnect and reconnect, you get arcing. If that PoE is still active, you're going to get arcing in whichever jack you're doing that. So over time, that's going to deteriorate the finish of those contacts. It's going to increase the resistance, and you're going to have a degradation in your performance. So that's something that people generally don't think too much about, and you won't hear it. You're not going to hear like a pop when you go plug it in, but there's just enough in there that that over time it's going to impact that. And even just even a non-PoE link, plugging and unplugging, it causes wear on the pins. So there's definitely that aspect of it is looking at down the road, what do we do after we've had this cabling in for years. So I don't know if you've run into that, Blake, where you've had to go. I know Chuck has. I don't know if you've had to go back into job sites that have been there over time, and you have to go back in and repair stuff because people are saying that something's not working, and it's more than just a cable that got cut.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing a lot of service calls. When I actually got into the field doing structured cabling access control, I was sent out quite a bit for fix, and repair stuff. And it was always somebody else's infrastructure, and it was very hard to tease apart what was going on. So any test equipment that I would go in there with, it was very useful for sure.
I'm sure that it was all.
The average lifespan of a structured cable plant 7 to 10 years, and it's not that the cable goes bad. It's new processors, new software come out, and it's always keeping us at the leading edge of technology. And if you don't have that cable performing at the way that it was designed, it may test perfectly fine today, but like you said, if somebody does repeated mating back and forth, and you get that shock on those tines, that's what those little pins are called, tines. It does erode the copper, and the copper is the conductivity material that makes it work, and that's going to cause you problems. And just kind of tying what Blake was just saying when he said he was the IT director. Let me ask you a question, Blake. If you had the option of having one point of contact for someone to check your Wi-Fi and do your bird testing and do your structured cabling, as opposed to having 3 different contractors, which would you choose?
Well, I would choose the one, but I would outsource like the MSP. I would outsource nearly everything and kind of let them deal with it. So yeah, for sure. One point of
Because it's less
context.
headaches
Nice.
for you as an IT director.
Yeah, and you mentioned having to go back in and sort out something that somebody else did, and I'm sure that every time you've had to do that, everything was perfectly documented and well labeled correctly.
Absolutely not.
So if you need to label, go check out our friend Todd over at Brother. Yeah, there you go. There's a Brother printer in Chuck's
Always.
background too. So yeah, go
Exactly
check out Todd if you do need to label something, because we've all run into that where everybody goes, oh yeah, I documented everything. Well, they documented it when it was originally put in, and then as they've had moves, adds, and changes, they've just fallen back on the documentation, and they go, oh yeah, here's my documentation, and you see some old spreadsheet that they printed out 15 years ago with line outs and scratch outs and handwritten additions, and you don't know when the last time that was updated. So
Spreadsheet, that's high tech. That's
yeah.
high tech. I'm old school.
Come on.
Well,
Old school.
exactly. So and to that end, some of the things that you have to do when you go into a situation like that, you've got to do a tone and probe operation. You've got to figure out where everything's going. So in the NSA, we've got that tone generator built in, so you can use it with any probe. We offer it with a filter probe that filters out the AC voltage harmonics, which is handy because I can't count the number of times I've been into a wiring environment and it's not just low voltage cabling that's in there. You've got line voltage in there, and you always get that buzz. So it interferes. But also, and I'll go ahead and Jacqueline can share my screen. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my my camera here and show you the Test Pro. I mean the NSA, because we do have a whoops, let me move this out of the way. There we go. So I've got my NSA set up. So one of the other things, in addition to the tone generation portion of this, if I go into my link here and plug in one of my remotes, I will get the remote ID on the opposite end if I correctly plug my cord in to my unit. So this is remote number 8. So it comes with number 1, and you've got remotes number 2 through 8. So in addition to being able to go into your expert tools here and generate a tone with the tone generator, I can also use these remote IDs, and I could plug these into multiple outlets in the office, in the wall plates, or I could plug them into the patch panel and then roam to, from wall plate to wall plate with my unit here. Just for the users that aren't familiar, or the viewers that aren't familiar, this screen is showing blank right now because I've got it VNC'd over here. So it's actually, you're seeing this screen on the left side. So anything we do on this unit right now is reflected on the display here. So that gives you that ability to locate those cables using those office IDs. And then, switching gears, I don't have to change any adapters in the top. All I have to do is change my port here. I'm just going to switch over to my my multi-gig, and I can go ahead and I can hook up to my switch here, and we can run. Let's do it this way. I'm going to go into my 10 gig switch, plug in to here, and we will get a connection. So I've connected it 2.5 gig. I'm showing live SNR here. I can run a multi-gig test up to 10 gig. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reduce the number of things that we're going to check. So we don't, in the field, not everybody's running all of these speeds. They might not be running 10 gig. Maybe they're only running 5 to their WAPs, for instance. So we can just uncheck what we don't want to run and then just go ahead and run a quick test. And what we're doing with this test is we're going to look at connection for 1 gig and 100 meg. We're going to look at the connection for 5 gig. And if I checked it, we would look at the connection for 2.5 and 10 as well. And we're going to measure the SNR at those multi-gig speeds. So 2.5 and above, we're measuring that signal to noise ratio. And what we're doing there, you'll hear some people might talk about doing a BERT test out in the field. BERT tests are not really practical out in a field setting, because it takes a long time to gather data that gives you some significant value. And it could take as long as an hour to run one of those. So most field techs aren't going to have the time to spend an hour on every single link. So what we do is we do an SNR test. You're going to be looking at really the same type of information, but it does it in a shorter time period and gives you an accurate reading. It's basically looking at your signal to noise ratio, which is going to cause that low signal to noise ratio will cause the errors that you're going to pick up on a BERT test. So, here we see we've got a 10 dB SNR. So for anybody that's not familiar with SNR, the higher that number, the better. So as it approaches 0, that's when we start to see problems. So if you've got something that's 0 or negative, that means, if it's 0, your noise is on parity with your signal, and you don't want that. If we had a problem with our SNR, we could examine it by pair, so we can figure out which one of our pairs is the worst case, which one's causing the problem. And then you can revert back to your physical cable test. And we show the connection 100 meg and 1 gig. And then, of course, we've got the POE, and we've measured our POE. And then we just save that just like we would a certification test or a physical cable test. And I'm trying to save it as a duplicate label. So I'm just going to save it as a different label. Doing it on the fly. And just so you know, with the label schemes here, you can import a label scheme with a CSV that you can share with your brother printer as well. So that kind of speeds things up as well. So that's our multi-gig test. Now I'm just going to switch gear here and just do a PoE troubleshooting test. So this is where I see some real value for those that are doing moves, adds, changes, or you're going in and having to help a customer troubleshoot something. You're going to hook this up where the PoE device connects to the end of the link. Immediately you see what's our connection look like. We see the allocated power. Okay, the switcher is going to be able to give me 71 watts. Now, I'm going to click this load button here. I'm going to get a higher reading than that because I'm just plugged really on a short patch cord directly into my PoE device. So I'm getting a higher reading here, but typically you're going to see a reduction. It's going to come in below 71.3 because that's the theoretical number on 100 meters of good cable. But this allows you to actually put that load on there and act like a PoE device and determine, can I get that PoE at the end of the link? And that's important because a lot of times I've been in situations where I've seen users who will get they'll buy their own PoE switch, and then they put it in, and it's a 90 watt switch. They paid a whole $100 for it on Amazon, and then they hook one device up and it works, and they hook others up, and then they're having problems. And it's because they're not getting 90 watts per port. And then of course, beyond this, and I'm going to jump off of I'll go back to cameras here in just a second, but real quick, I'll show you, with network tests, this is the reports that we were looking at earlier. Again, I'm in the same adapter. I can go in and I can discover a network. All I've got to do is connect my unit to a live network here, and it will start discovering. We'll establish our connection, and what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and start building a list of our devices. So we've got the connection, and we'll start to see devices appear as they're discovered on the network, and then we can do ping and trace route and all that good stuff. So just by going in here, I can look at the network, and then I can see what I'm connected to. I can go get that switch detail that we talked about, and this is a cool test for a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is if somebody moves a patch cord around in the closet, then they might have connected somebody to the wrong port on a switch. So this will tell you what port you're on, what VLAN you're on, because that same switch is going to have the potential to have multiple VLANs, and every port's going to be different. So if they move somebody to the wrong port, now all of a sudden they can't get to the resources they need, internet or servers or things like that. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen now and go back to camera. So didn't want to run away with it there, but wanted to show a couple of those things relative to the reports that we talked about earlier. So to actually let you guys see how we got to the reports. That's how we run those tests. And this was all with that one tester, the NSA. So it lets you switch back and forth between that physical cable test, doing the network stuff. All of that is all in that one platform.
The SNR test is interesting. That's the first time I've seen that because I would typically run a burnt test, and
Right.
like you said, it takes a very long time.
It
So
does.
having that SNR functionality, that's a big game
And
changer.
and the reality is, if you fail SNR, you're going to fail a BERT. So, and you've run BERT, so you gotta, if you're looking at running a BERT test on 100 links, that's a lot of time.
Yes.
So, and this lets you run that SNR test as a qualification or validation of your installed system. So you've certified the cabling already, because you're required to do that. Or you've just tested the cabling if you're doing NSA and it's a job where maybe it didn't require certification for whatever reason. But then you need to go on beyond that and do that multi-gig SNR and along with the PoE. So, and there's so much PoE going in now. Everything is running PoE. Window coverings, lights, monitors in conference rooms, everything's PoE. So being able to do that in your certification tester or your qualification plus tester is a bonus. It kind of goes back to that, expanding your service offering and adding to your bottom line. So, and at least in my opinion, and I'd like to hear what you guys think, but in my opinion, having that all in one platform, having a certifier that can do all that, or having a qualifier that can do all that in one platform, to me makes a lot more sense to somebody who's actually out there in the field using this stuff, because they don't have to invest money in multiple test platforms, learn multiple user interfaces, because not everything's going to have the same UI. With this, you've got the same UI. Once you learn how to use one function, it's just a matter of putting a different adapter in it.
One of the things I've learned being a content creator, by the way, I'm coming up on my 100th episode on the podcast. I'm like,
wow,
85 or something now. I'm going to have to do something special for my 100th episode, but I never really thought that this would come to fruition. But one of the hottest subjects that we have is to certify or not to certify, right? And I don't understand that, because I've always worked for companies that always certified. And I think the biggest issue is the barrier to entry, right? The cost. The certifiers can be super expensive. But like you said, if you could tie in more functions with that tester, then it makes that investment easier for a company to do. And in our environment today, we're not just doing cabling now. We're also doing wireless access points, right? We got Wi-Fi that we got to test as well. And if you can tie in, again, don't be a one-trick pony. That's one thing I tell people who want business advice. Don't be a one-trick pony. Be able to do many things. That way, if one thing slows down, you can make money on other spots. So that's one thing I like, is you have the ability to plug in a Wi-Fi testing ability on that same platform that the technischen is already used to using.
Yep, exactly. That reduces your training time. And again, you're not having to fumble around finding different testers, or, oh, I left that tester in the shop, or it's in Joe's truck and I don't have it today. You've got it all there with you.
Yeah, the majority of our audience, at least my assumption, is that we're not doing these big jobs that require certification all the time. So the guys that are doing, 20, 30 drops, are installing in like a MVR, access control stuff, then this is for them. I would imagine that they could benefit tremendously from this instead of buying a certification unit.
Exactly. And the neat thing about this one is that, you saw the test reports. The tests that we're running with this qualification plus tool, we like to call it qualification plus, because it really is above most qualifiers that are out there, probably all of them. Especially when it comes to that RF testing, we're still doing that TIA 1152A, the prescribed tests that are spelled out that you're supposed to run. And we're using the TIA 568 standards for those limits, albeit from a single end into a remote terminator. So you're getting that level of testing. The plots and things that you see on a certifier, you will see those on that network services system. When you go in and look at those tests, you'll see the plots. You'll get the same TDR functionality where you get a distance to a fault. Chuck was talking about this earlier with the certifier. When you've got the certifier, you've got two screens, you've got one on each end. If there is a fault, both technicians from opposite ends of that link can drill into the test results and look at the TDR traces to figure out where along the cable the fault is. So they know, is it my end or the other guy's end? Or if you're by yourself and if you've got a tester that just has LEDs on the remote and you're at the remote end and you see the test fail, you got to go walking back to the closet to figure out where the failure is. You go look at the tester. Oh, nuts. It's at the remote end. I just came from there. I could have fixed it before I came back here. So, it's those little things that kind of add up and help the bottom line. When you're talking about we're talking about earlier about saving time on the job, the 6-second test, on the certifier is part of it. The 6-second auto test is part of it. So, but one of the things that we do want to point out, we've got two products that we're mentioning here. We're talking about Test Pro and we're talking about the Network Service Assistant. So Test Pro is a bidirectional dual-ended certification system, and the NSA is a single-ended test. So two different applications, really, if you will. And there's some overlap. We actually have some customers who buy both. The Test Pro is targeted more at the contractors and integrators who have to provide certification results. They're supporting a manufacturer warranty. It's a big job, and the scope of work calls out certification. And realistically, on the really big jobs, you're going to want to certify it. That's typical. And then the other side of it is the Network Service Assistant. So for those other jobs that maybe like Blake's talking about that don't require certification, small jobs, you're doing small office, home office type stuff, moves, adds, changes. Network techs and network owners, network managers would use that type of product as well for those applications. And again, you've got fiber options on both of these as well. So for the certifier, the Test Pro, you're going to do dual-ended bidirectional or dual-ended single direction. And then for the NSA, we give you a loopback, so you can do a loopback fiber test with that as well. So looks like we might have a few questions, but before we go to that, I'd like to see if Chuck and Blake, do you guys have any other tips, non-tester related tips that might be useful to the people who've tuned in as far as being able to win more bids and expanding the service offering, something beyond testing?
Beyond testing, that's a good one. I think the biggest thing is investing in your employees and then documenting that process. If you know me, you've heard me say that D word many times on my shows. Document, right? Invest in your employees and they'll take care of your customers. That's the biggest thing that most companies miss out on. There's a few companies that get it right, and I talked with one of them just this week, but there's a lot of them that they throw their guys out there and it's cabling, it's the same. No, invest in your people, because the more efficient they are, the quicker they're going to get their job done, and the less likely you're going to have to roll a truck to do a service call to fix something that should have been done right the first time. So that's my tip. Invest in your people.
One thing that I found was really beneficial, especially for winning bids, but also providing that customer with the documentation and the success of the project, was getting something like AutoCAD or Bluebeam and doing the as-builds. But before you even do the as-builds, do the whole layout of where you're going to put everything, and then present that to the customer with their logo on it, make it look real nice. And that ties into, the labeling and the testing. So it's like this, there's three main pillars of, the documentation, the as-builds, and then, the testing of everything. So that'll definitely set you apart, because a lot of these, the smaller kind of integrators and installers, they don't really do that, the as-builds and everything the way it really should be. And if you can figure out how to do that, or hire somebody to do it, then that's going to set you apart and help you win bids.
And go along with what Blake just said, here's one that a lot of people miss. And you can do this for even your small jobs. Create a schedule and put it in the proposal, right? Say on days 1 through 3, we'll be pulling cables. Days 4 or 5, we'll be terminating. Day 6, we'll be testing. Day 7 will be whatever. And what that does is it sets a solid foundation, an expectation between both you and the customer when the work will be performed. Again, you can use it for small projects, you can use it for large projects, and you don't have to use, any fancy project management software. I mean, if you want to, fine, have at it, but you can also do it in spreadsheets too. You can make a simple Gantt chart in a spreadsheet. Right. And then what happens is, then when you get on the job site and you find out that you can't terminate jacks because the painters haven't finished painting yet, Well, you've already put in the proposal your expectation to be able to do that type of work on those days. There's a legitimate change order right there. So you're protecting your bid.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Good info. So a couple things real quick. We're running over and I'm not worried about that. If you guys have got some extra time, I'll keep going.
Good.
One thing that was that we didn't mention on both of these testers, we also do Wi-Fi testing. So you can look at all your SSIDs, see the signal strength, see what channel they're on. You can connect to a WAP and do roaming signal strength tests to see where you've got your weak spots, where you drop off. And you can set that threshold for your drop off. So, we were always taught in the Bixie Wi-Fi class, neg 67. That's our bottom line. But you can choose that level, whatever you want as your acceptable level, and you can roam the site and figure out where your drop offs are. One thing popped up too was, can you measure load and how high? So I think by that, what's what PoE level do we go to? We go to 90 watt PoE. So we can go, we can do all the different BT, AT, AF levels. We can do UPoE. But if you're measuring the device is like running it through the tester and measuring that, we don't do that. But we do have something called a PoE external load test, and it uses a small box with a series of switches on it. And what you do is you connect your tester, either the NSA or the Test Pro, to the PoE. And then there's banana jacks on that test adapter. So you go into the external load test and we will output the power from the PoE to those banana jacks. And that you run the banana cable from those jacks into the jacks on the PoE load box. And then in 15 watt increments, you flip switches. And you can put whatever load you want and you let it sit over time. So if you've got a link that you think is suspicious, you're having some intermittent PoE problems, you can put your 60 watts or 90 watts of load on it, let it sit for a few hours, and then come back and you'll be able to have a log in the tester. You'll be able to offload that using our software and get a CSV file that shows you for that whole time period what your SNR values were on the Ethernet connection and what your PoE load was. So you can actually see the fluctuations on there over time. So that's an added test when it comes to the PoE. So looking at some of the questions here, we got a 73 WA4SJC. Somebody called me out there, another ham out there. Greetings to George Humphrey, another ham. We've got, and Chuck, how close are you to getting your ham license?
I wish I could say I was close. I purchased the study software. I've not even looked at it yet. Right now, I'm running a study group, a TDMM study group, so I'm kind of preoccupied in evenings with that right now.
Yep. Yeah. It's not like you have anything else to do, right?
You're right. Exactly.
So somebody commented, VLAN discovery on your analytics pays for this device. Seriously does. Nice comment there. Yeah. One of the things we do, and we didn't show that, but there's a VLAN discovery feature in the switch detail. So it shows you that you're on that VLAN. So that's important. But beyond that, we also do a separate VLAN discovery screen where if you can plug into a switch trunk port, you can do a VLAN discovery over time, and it will discover the visible VLANs. It'll show you how many packets it saw over that time period per VLAN, and it'll put them out in a nice bar graph or pie chart for you. So that's another functionality built in. Somebody else commented, I think it's the same person who said the VLANs is the first job time saving alone will pay for the device. Nice. Good shout outs there. Somebody said, is that a Milwaukee pack out box?
Indeed, it is.
Ah, nice.
He's just showing off. Off.
Staying organized, man.
Nice. Yeah, George is active. He said hi to Chuck too, so he's a fan, Chuck.
Yep, he's always on my live streams.
So, all right. So I think I don't see any other questions here that we missed. Good afternoon, Quest Contract and Engineering on board. So Quest is here. All right. Welcome, Quest.
I know Eric very well.
Yeah. So, all right. Good job, guys. So I appreciate you taking time. I know it eats up lunchtime because we all have jobs to do, right? But we don't need to eat, right?
No.
So, any last thoughts before we close out from either of you?
I'll go first, I guess. Knowledge is power. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So just document. We used to do this thing called Documentation Nation. It was kind of like a subset of Low Voltage Nation. So whatever you can document, and whether it's testing, labeling stuff, and then providing it to the customer, I can't stress that enough. So I'm going to leave it at that.
All right, good deal, good deal. So I'll throw out one of my favorite movie quotes. Shane Falco from The Replacements, "Chicks dig scars." So sure everybody's seen that movie. So all right, guys. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thanks to everyone who tuned in as well. Thank you both, Chuck and Blake, for joining us today. This was a fantastic episode, and look forward to chatting with you guys more in the future. And don't forget to go check out Chuck over at Let's Talk Cabling, and check out Blake at Low Voltage Nation. So make sure get on board with those guys. You'll get a lot of good information out of them. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Take care.